Welcome to Dear Art Producer, a podcast connecting the photography and video community with art producers. Drawing on her agency experience some years ago, photography agent Heather Elder penned an open letter to art producers discussing the finer points of working with one another. This podcast takes that idea and will introduce you to different art producers, share the stories of their diverse career paths, explore what it means to stay relevant, and examine industry topics such as marketing, estimating, directing, websites, and more.
Hi, welcome to Dear Art Producer. I am your host, Heather Elder, and today we welcome supervising art producer and buyer Kathleen Candelaria from AbelsonTaylor in Chicago. Kathleen was an art producer at FCB before she joined AbelsonTaylor in 2017. She has touched almost every major brand at almost every point in the creative process and has a vast network of vendors to call for her varied projects. I have known Kathleen for years and always enjoy the projects I work on with her. Her belief in transparency always makes for a solid bidding process. Hi.
Hi.
How are you today?
Great. Thank you.
I'm so happy to be here. As we kind of talked about when we walked in, Lorianne and I sometimes fight over who gets to come to Chicago because we both love it so much. So I won this time. Yay. But she's usually the one that's here. So I'm glad I'm getting to see you. And you were so nice and gracious to host one of my photographers, Andy Anderson, last week or the week before.
Yes,
so
always great to see him.
Thank you for that. It was fun to reminisce about the Diners Club project he worked on.
Yes.
So, yeah, it's nice to have history with someone.
Yes.
For sure.
Yes.
Well, I always kind of like to get started talking a little bit about your career path and where you were before this, how you kind of got into this. I think it informs so much of who we are and how we handle our jobs and this idea of transparency I talked about earlier. Just all the experiences, you know, what are maybe just a quick summary of?
Sure. Well, if I can go all the way back to college, I started studying in accounting, thinking I would be a super accountant. Got very bored with that and quickly realized I needed an art outlet. So I studied photography with art history as well. Then I got into the world and started at production companies, a photo studio in the beginning, and then an animation company, assisting and producing both in those places. And then I was lucky enough and fortunate enough to get a breakthrough into the agency world, where back in the day, we had a traffic department, which was a great intro into the agency world because you dealt with every department. I was fortunate enough to be trained initially under the broadcast, and she was mainly the broadcast traffic manager, but she did overscale talent negotiations and music licensing.
Really important for today.
Yes, third-party licensing agreements for anything that appeared, mostly in broadcast spots. There was a realignment that was at JWT, and I was fortunate enough to then, she knew my direction and was placed in with the art buyers there. And that was back in the day, if you remember Louise Malman.
I do.
And Barbara Harriman.
Oh my gosh.
So those are truly two of the biggest mentors that have probably the most influence on my style. Mm-hmm. Very different styles themselves, but great to learn from them back in the day. From there, I moved on to Draft Worldwide at the time before they merged with FCB, and was doing art buying then. And then from there, did freelance. I repped people for a while, repped some artists locally, and had a couple babies along the way. And then continued to freelance back in the art buying world and ended up at FCB for about 9 years. And now I'm here at AbelsonTaylor.
That's great.
And I loved the move to healthcare advertising. We do all healthcare here, which is a little bit more rewarding than just selling beer and cigarettes or trying to push people to buy things that maybe they don't really need.
Yeah.
So I feel a little more rewarded here.
Oh, that's great. Well, I was just recording another podcast earlier, and this idea of mentorship came up and how important it is for somebody in your role to not only have had a mentor, but to be a mentor, because there really is no single path to get to this job. And it is changing so much and so rapidly. And if you don't have the right people teaching you, you will flounder.
Yes.
It's either sink or swim, but hopefully you can have a good life raft there with your mentor.
With the mentor. Yeah.
What are some of the things that your mentors taught you that you maybe pass on and you think are still relevant today?
Of course. Keep a cool head.
Yeah. Yep.
People will ask for the impossible all the time. It's a matter of negotiating with your team on time and budget in order to get the best production. In my younger days, I probably wasn't as quick to keep a calm head and would react. Now I just sort of absorb everything that people are asking me, and I let them know, maybe we can't get everything you want, but here's a path to how we can get to what you want.
Yeah. This idea of keeping a cool head and being calm and not panicking comes up as an answer to that question a lot. What is a really important skill to have as an art producer? Yes. And I think it's incredibly important because you're the one who's managing everybody, including my side. Right? If you're panicking, I'm going to panic and I'm going to go get somebody else to panic along with me. So what does that look like, that rep art producer relationship in that moment when it's really tense and really like you want to hit the panic button, but you're trying not to?
Transparency. You've mentioned that already. As much as I know, I'm going to try and let you know. If I feel like the ask is bigger than what if they know what they want to spend, I will sort of let them know that on the onset. But I will say, let me take this to my people, have the conversation with them, because I know you have ways of becoming efficient when needed. There are ways that we can get to a negotiated space that everybody can be happy. If they can't come up with more time, then we figure out what we can do in the time. If they can't come up with a bigger budget, then we sort of compromise and say, we're going to try and get what we can, but here's realistically what you can do.
I think so much that matters in our job is experience. It really is. And I think at different points in our career, you and I have both been doing this a long time, the art buyer or the art producer role had different values in an agency. And there were some times where it was valued so much more than other times. And I'm seeing that there's a lot of freelancers out there, which may or may not mean the agency is valuing that role or not. There's a lot of factors that come into play there. But what I'm recognizing is that the art producers that have steady work and the freelancers that are getting the steady work, people are valuing that experience because there is so much to be learned right now and understood. And if you don't have that experience to draw from, I'm not saying a new person to the business isn't getting work. Like there is absolutely a place for them and value for them. But just doing all of these interviews, I'm seeing the level of experience that you have all had, that timeline of our industry and what we've all gone through. And now you've made it to the other side and you're bringing so much experience to the table, which I hope you feel valued for.
Yes. And at this point I have, we all gain confidence as we have experience, and knowing when I can push back, when I can convince somebody that's not necessarily seeing the right fit for a project. I'm able to do that now more confidently. And I think that's very valuable. And I think that's something that really only comes with experience.
I think so. And also you can correct me if I'm wrong, but working on pharmaceutical projects, there's a lot of real patience that you are dealing with. So it's not just, hire the talent or do a casting. Yes. There's a lot of sensitivities that go along with that. So you have to, understand the process enough to recognize and see ahead what might be needed for these patients.
Yes, correct. We've even had more active lifestyle type of shoots with actual patients where we've had to have medics on set. Not a lot of people would think of that ahead of time. But yeah.
Yeah. So in order to get the experience means you have to have had the experience. And we've been doing this a long time. obviously technology is a big change in our industry, and working on pharmaceutical clients is different than working on consumer clients. What are some of the changes you've seen in the industry? And maybe it's just within the type of client that you've worked on, but what are some of the things that, have changed that we should all be kind of paying attention to?
Well, obviously, with social media and all the new media, there are much more content that we're trying to capture for in any one given assignment. So I think educating the client and that it's not just adding motion to a still shoot or a print shoot. It does add a little bit of resources and time. So just saying that you can't just grab an iPhone and get motion while we're shooting stills, it just doesn't always equate that way. But other than that, I think just being more efficient, quicker in productions.
And I do think clients have gotten this mentality, and I'm going to make it incredibly, way more simple than it had, how it evolved. But I've always had this idea that, when iTunes came around, people thought, oh, I can get a song for 99 cents and I can push a button and I can, have that song download really quickly. I can get that content fast and inexpensively. And the same thing with the iPhone, right? Ooh, I can take this picture. I can do this better, or it's so easy to take this picture. The barriers of entry, really broke down there. And I'm not saying everybody thinks they're a photographer, but I think that idea of creating content, when the client asks for that, they want so many scenarios, so many different versions. They want motion on top of it. And it really does take an experienced buyer and an experienced rep and an experienced photographer, absolutely, yes. to help educate the client. Yes. And I think in the beginning of this timeline, we were all very scared about what that meant. And now I'm again, after all of these conversations I'm having, I'm hearing people come to the table with a voice of strength of trying to manage the process with these clients a little bit more.
For sure. Yes.
Do you find that when your clients were asking you for content early on, and everyone was kind of scrambling to give them as much as they can, do you find the conversations are different now when everyone's like, okay, we can't, that's too much. Let's prioritize.
Yes, for sure. We definitely, a lot of times will be concepting for stills, print, web, digital use. And they'll say, well, let's just capture motion while we're doing this. We still have the creatives go through the exercise of storyboarding, regardless of whether they know how they're going to use it in the end. We want to make sure we're going in with a plan of how we're capturing the content and not just flying by the seat of our pants saying, oh, we'll just get motion while we're on set.
Right.
We have to have a plan. So we definitely have them storyboard out how they see it playing out. Sometimes it is just a straight capture of emotion of what the still is.
Right, like making a still image move or something. Yes. But other times it's a more directed,
storyboarded kind of thing. Yes.
All right, so let's talk about getting your attention a little bit. How do you find the photographers and directors that you work with?
So I think first and foremost, the work has to speak to me. So that needs to be in the forefront of however you're communicating to me. Whether you're going to put your efforts into emails or printed mailings, I still want the work to be forefront. So don't play it up with a gimmick or anything like that. I tend to just look for something unique that isn't the norm of the day. I do like to look at young, up and coming people because I think they have a different perspective that maybe somebody that's been doing it for 30 years may not get. But I think, I quickly look through emails. If it is pertinent to me, I push it over to a folder where I can look at it later. If I get mailings, I do go through them, but I have to go because of the volume. We're looking at it quickly. Anything that grabs my attention or pertains to my clients, I put aside for a while. And then I'll clear them out after a while, but
And definitely. Is your digital file cabinet bookmarks, or do you drag them into like an email folder? I drag them into
an email folder.
And then when you need something, you review them.
I would say that meeting photographers in person is a big bonus as well, because I can get a feel for their personality, just who they are as a person.
Mm-hmm.
And then I love handwritten things.
Yeah.
I know it's not always practical for people to do that.
Oh, no, it's so nice.
But I love handmade things too. And I will definitely take the time to look at it, and I save them forever, usually.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I know that, having repping 10 photographers and having repped many more through my career, I'm always encouraging my photographers to go out and meet people. And they're all open to it and love the idea of it. In reality, it's not the easiest thing because they have to find the time. And some of them actually prefer to communicate visually and not, in person per se. But I can't stress enough from the rep point of view and from all of these podcasts and hearing the art producers say the same thing, how important it is for you to get to know them and not just rely on the rep. Right. Is that accurate?
Yes, totally. And when I don't have the chance to have met somebody in person, I am very open to trying new talent. How else are you going to change the norm or whatever? So what I will do in those cases is we always have creative calls when we're bidding. And I always make my creatives have a conversation on the phone with the photographers. I get a really good sense of how collaborative they're going to be, what they're going to bring to it. I like photographers that can add to the creative process. We may not be able to go that direction, but rather than being so prescriptive from us, we'll get that's why we're hiring them for their expertise and their look or their talent or what they bring to the table. So I rely heavily on those conversations, as well as I ask for any kind of project a treatment.
Yes. Okay, you said so many good things in that sentence, and I want to break it down. The first part of it is the creative call. Mm-hmm. I've sat on so many of those. And I don't sit on all of them, but when I can, I try to. And there's such a difference between a good creative call and a bad creative call. And it's not just photographer driven.
No.
Agencies sometimes get in their own way. There's so many people in the room or so many people on the call. And I feel like sometimes they're just like taking us through their shot list. Mm-hmm. And there's no thought, or that's not true. There's always thought to it. But I wish there were more moments in the conversation for the photographer to chime in, or leading questions of the photographer, here are the images of yours that I liked.
Right.
How do you see those relate to this campaign?
Exactly.
What is the location that you have in mind? Instead of just, I'm going to walk you through the piece of paper that I just sent you, which is also important because sometimes there's a lot of information in there. But I find that from a photographer's point of view, that would be so helpful because sometimes you've got so many cooks in the kitchen and you can't see who's talking, right? Because you're all in different rooms, so you don't know when to chime in. And so if you're asked a direct question that's open-ended like that.
Something you said in there was, what work of the photographers has drawn you for this project? Mm-hmm. And I tend to ask that a lot of my creatives when I'm sending out my formal request form, which I'm very
you're so good at that.
Regimented.
Thank you.
I have a lot of information in there.
Sometimes I want to send them to other people and be like, this is how it's supposed to be done.
I get a lot of compliments on them. It's a lot of effort, but it pays off in the end.
Absolutely.
And I will ask my creatives, can you show me what photography of what you were drawn to for this artist? And that way I can give them that.
That's so helpful. Right. It really pushes us in a direction, especially, which gives us the transition here to the other thing that I wanted to talk about was the treatment, right? So I'm advising my photographers and working with them. They're doing the most of the work, but we're talking about image selection sometimes. And how do I know what images that you liked and that were relevant to you? I might go in a whole different direction. Right. So having that information is really, really helpful.
And I know sometimes with photographers, they are visual people. Mm-hmm. They don't always communicate with the written word as well. But I have been thoroughly impressed in the recent years with the treatments that I've been getting. I think it's something
they're upping their game for sure.
Everybody asks for it. They know they have to do it. Mm-hmm. So I think they've gotten a lot better at it.
I think you're right. And I've learned so much on these podcasts about things to incorporate into the treatments that have been really helpful.
Right.
So when you get a treatment, I mean, this is an obvious question, but do they get read?
Yes. I look at them before I push them out to the creative team, but I will definitely look through them, read them, see if there's any feedback I can give before I pass that along. Certainly I'll do that. But then I do pass it along to the creatives. And here, I'm pretty sure that they get read by everybody. And if not the art directors, then I know their group creative directors are definitely looking at it.
And do you share them with your clients?
Sometimes. Yeah. It's up to the creatives how they want to present to the client when we're having an award meeting. But generally they will pull a lot from them. They will lift pages and just share that with the client. As long as it's strong.
Yeah. No, that's great because the answer really does vary from agency to, and I actually think from project to project, it would vary.
Yes.
So, and I've heard lots of times that people say, we might be bidding 3 photographers and Heather, your photographer is 3rd on the list, but we got his or her treatment and they've risen right to the top. So
even after calls, that happens.
It absolutely it happens. Or you were first and now you're not.
Yeah,
so it really is important for a photographer to know how to communicate verbally, visually, and with a treatment.
Yes.
It just is nowadays.
Yes, they have to have that skill.
I talk a lot about the idea that a photographer's imagery can no longer just speak for itself.
Right.
So there has to be a lot of other substance and brand associated with it. What are the beliefs and values? What are the things that make this photographer shoot this way and this style? And I think on a call and in a treatment are perfect places for that to come out and for a photographer to align themselves with that brand that they're shooting with. All right, so kind of getting back to getting your attention, we didn't really touch on things like sourcebooks or Instagram, social media. Do you use sourcebooks or the online version of the sourcebooks?
I will occasionally, if I'm tired of looking at my screen, I'll grab a book and just peruse through. But I do use the online sources as well. I look through my saved emails of, I remember there was somebody. I will pull out my stack of tears that people have sent me and run through those.
And what about social media?
Not so much for me.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't do that too much.
What about your creatives? I know they use you as a resource for sure. Where do you think they're finding their inspiration? Are they using any of those tools or are they
probably
looking
online.
For somewhere? Mm-hmm.
Probably online source books. Sometimes just searching the internet.
Yeah. We call that just internally, I call that like 3rd tier.
Yes.
Meaning, can we create a project that can live in the target market, right? The creatives world that isn't an interruption. We haven't sent them an email or sent them a mailer. Like, can they discover you somewhere else, right? How do we become a part of culture?
Yes.
Rather than trying to have a share of voice, how can we be a part of what's going on out there so they just find us in their own world? And, we're not knocking on their door saying, please hire me.
Yeah. And to come to that, I know you're interested in where we get our content since we're doing more social, more motion with our stills. I've had some unique projects where we did find trending Instagrammers on a certain subject. Mm-hmm. And I had a whole process of reaching out to them and saying, would you be interested in being a contributing content producer, where we would not guarantee that we would use their things, but we would send out a brief. We'd pull up we'd made a contract for them. They would agree to it. We would send them a brief monthly, weekly. They would submit. And if we chose, then we would pay them for that. The agreed upon
And
contract.
would that work show up in social?
That
or
was mostly social. That was probably like a Facebook campaign.
So you didn't produce that project. They went off and did it on their own.
Right.
And then they would submit something to you. And then if it worked, they would get paid for it.
But it was just a way because as people are looking for real, non-staged photos. This was a way of getting, and I think you see it more. That's another thing. There's found footage. And there are companies now that you can submit to them. This is the footage we found. Can you clear this for me? And I think you will see this.
Oh, that's interesting. So you find something out there in the world, you send it to this company, they figure out where you found it and if you can use it or license it. Oh, that's interesting. Is that something fairly new, or has that been around for a while? And
I think it's been probably in the past couple of years. We're doing a project now that sort of has that, but I think you could if you watch some of the broadcast spots, you'll say, you can see that, oh, that's like a YouTuber, or that's a Instagram person. That's actual. You can see that it's actual footage. And how the marketers are finding that, I'm not so sure. That was something I did at FCB, was directly reaching out to just amateur people.
Right.
And creating a contract with them. And then
Didn't you and I work on a job? Was it with Doug Menuet that we were bidding together for somebody who was creating this kind of artwork?
Yeah.
Was that right?
I think so.
And he wasn't a commercial photographer. He just had kind of created this kind of look and feel, and it's kind of something similar, right? Like you had to go out and find that. Yeah, that's it's interesting. There's just so much more to choose from. I mean, I always say that I used to have 100% of your time.
Yes.
Because that's all you were doing. We're looking for people like me and the people that I represent. But now you have the world at your fingertips and how you're going to get content to,
exactly. And the realness that people are looking for are just amateur people taking videos that are a cute cat video or their baby or whatever.
So how does the rep relationship work for you when finding a photographer?
I know that I can count on photographers that are repped have much more valuable resources at their fingertips. I think you have a broad experience. You have several producers that you're working with, that I know if I have a tough project, I'm not going to necessarily go to the up-and-coming artist that does not have a rep. I want the rep to be there to sort of oversee and make sure that the difficult parts are going to be handled, that we can come up with solutions collectively. I'm not sure that somebody that's as inexperienced would be able to bring that level.
So I've heard from photographers who listen to the podcast, two different types, and they wonder about the repping relationship there. One are the younger photographers who are starting out and they feel like, oh my God, I have to get a rep. They're so behind. And will you still look at me if I don't have a rep? And then the photographer who is at a certain point in their career where they may have not had a good experience with a rep, or they're just kind of done and they want to keep it in-house. And, any and all, like the beauty of our business is we can manage it any way we want. Do you have any advice or things that you'd want to point out to either of those groups of people?
Well, I think the up-and-comer or a photographer that doesn't have a rep, I think smart questions to ask your art buyer producer at an agency is, do you have a preferred producer that you like to work with? Is there somebody that I should be working with? I would not not want to look at somebody because they don't have a rep. The project, if it's too difficult, may not be the right fit for them. But if they have a strong in-house producer that's worked with them for a long time and I have a relationship with them, then that's a different story. I think there's just not all photographers have full-time. They just can't afford to do that.
It's not possible.
So that would be another, if you're not repped, but you have a producer that you've worked with for 15 years, obviously I trust that.
There's not a lot of us. A lot of us are leaving and doing other things.
Yes.
How about the photographer on the other end of the spectrum, the one who just has been doing it for a long time and has brought it in-house and is not interested in having a rep?
It can be better sometimes because you're direct. You're dealing straight with the source, and there's not, I'll have to check with the photographer to see if he's agreeable to this. There's just that cutting out the middleman. But sometimes the buffer is nice when I have this unrealistic ask and I can go to you and say, this is crazy, but I want you to think about it. If there's a way that we can achieve this, or talk, maybe somebody that is perfectly fit for that.
That goes back to this idea of being a translator. And I talk about that a lot on the podcast, that you and I are absolutely translators. I'm translating my photographer and production language into your language, which you then translate into creative director language and client language. And you're coming back and I'm putting it back into so what I'm hearing on this end, I'm absolutely not going to, I'm going to filter and, and make sure that, or I'm probably going to filter what they're saying and not change it, but try and, come up with some common ground to present to you. And then you're going to do the same thing back to me. Yep. So I do think that's important. And it does come back to something else that we talk a lot about on the podcast, is the importance of relationships. Yes. And what we talked about earlier is the importance of experience and what that brings to the table. And those relationships that you have are priceless, I would think. You've spent a career building them.
Right. And I always will say, not so much when I was younger, but as I've gained experience, people will ask for crazy things on agency client end. And I, again, have to filter that because my reputation goes beyond wherever I am at the moment. And I've always said that. Who knows where I will be tomorrow? Right. My vendors are my vendors. Right. I want to stick up for the vendors when I have to. And same thing for the agency. I want to, make sure that we're servicing the client as best we can. Yeah. So I think it's just, a good balance of knowing when to say to the agency, you can't do that, or this is taking advantage of this person. And we know some jobs we come along and it's a great project with an adequate budget and we know we can take it and we'll run with it. But then when I have the more difficult things, if we have experience that we've worked well together and I'm going to be fair, then I can come back to you and say, this one's kind of a weird thing. Can you help me with this? And you'd be more willing to help.
You'd be more willing to help. And I'm telling you, there are definitely people in the business that when I get an email from them or the phone rings, we're both, Lorianne and I are like, oh no, did you see the email? Guess who emailed? I mean, and there's not a lot of people that way, but there's a lot of people who, I was laughing when I said I want to share your spec sheet, with someone else, with other people. There are people who don't spend the time to share that information correctly, and you have put that time in. And I appreciate that. I think that's fair and helpful. There are these same people who don't let us know when we don't get a job, or if a job doesn't happen or it goes away, or they're not giving us the information that we need. And if those people call me and they need a favor, I mean, I'm client service focused, so I'm going to help them.
Try.
But it's going to be a lot harder to walk away from you than it is going to be to walk away from this other person who hasn't been there for all of, especially from a photographer's point of view. I'm going to always try. A photographer sometimes going to be like, no, I'm not doing that. So I think that's such a huge, important part of what we do. What about getting jobs approved? Do you find it's harder or easier nowadays? Is the process longer? Is there more to do?
I think it's all the same. Every project is different. Right at the beginning, what I try to do is understand the scope of what we need to get out of what we're going to try and produce. And then I'll ask them, do you have a budget? That's like the first thing I want to try and do as soon as I'm brought in. If they have a budget, I will ask them what it is. And I will say, okay, that's going to be adequate for your ask, or your ask is not matching what this is. But if you don't have the option of getting more money, then let's move forward and see what we can get and how we can do it. I'm not going to just, and then I know when I have a job that's an inadequate budget, I'll say to you, this is what they're telling me we have. What do you think? Right. Just to get an idea. If I believe we have an adequate budget, I won't give out so much information. I'll competitively bid it and see how things come in. But I don't want to waste anybody's time. So I try to feel out the account team and what the client is feeling they have. I don't always take that as written in stone because we all know things change. Right. And the client got other lots of other things they're thinking about. So,
well, and sometimes you get budgets and they aren't just for that reason that you're calling me.
Yes.
So I've kind of evolved my question obviously I'm going to ask, do you know the budget? Because that's crucial, right? I want to get you the best possible job for the amount of money you have.
Right.
And I want to make sure I'm not coming over if I can help that. But the other part that when you say to me, oh, I don't know, like most times you don't know, I say, do you think they are going to have enough?
Right.
Right? Because sometimes, now if I'm dealing with you, I know you're going to tell me and we're going to figure it out, and you might not know, but I'll give you what I think it is and you'll come back to me. There's some people I've never met before. I don't know their agency. I don't know what. And we could be so far off.
Right.
They might think $20,000 is a lot of money. And I would have come in at $80,000 for their project with all their talent and all their stuff. So trying to get out a budget out of those people is really important without sounding like a jerk.
No, because you don't want to waste anybody's time.
I don't want to waste anybody's time. And I don't want to make my photographers sound like they're so egotistical and elitist that they could never do a job for $20,000. But literally, you don't have enough money to pay the 20 talent that you want on set for this job with $20,000.
And I think that's a lot of educating with the client. When you say, how has the business changed? I think in the upfront process, when I'm estimating, I'm having to ask for, what is your shoot day schedule going to look like? So I can take that to the client and educate them what it takes to get X number of shots done in a day, or why it takes this much time. The more information I can get from you guys, the better I can explain it. Why does it take this much?
Yeah. No,
because you want to do it right.
You do want to do it right. And it's really important. And I think there's so many jobs that come across my desk that people just don't know, and they're fishing sometimes. And I'm happy to help, really. But at that point, I don't know that I want to get my photographer involved and get the producer involved and have them take their focus off of a shoot so they can take 20 minutes at lunch to do a creative call. So I think it's really important for your role and my role. Like you and me, we do this already. Yes. But someone else who's in a rep role and a buyer role that haven't met each other, to really try and suss that out ahead of time before you get all these people involved, and let's define what a ballpark is.
Yes.
Right. I can ballpark a job really quickly, but if you're going to take that number and go to the client and then hold me to that, that's not a ballpark.
Right.
So, it's just, I think it's very important to be able to talk about budgets and money transparently.
Yes.
Okay, well, we're kind of winding down. I mean, I kind of like to talk about you personally a little bit. Maybe asking you, what do you find the most challenging part of your job?
I think just letting people know realistically what is doable and making sure that we keep integrity and the highest level of the creative that we can do. Sure, we can do things quickly and inexpensively, but we want the best creative to come out of it. So I think educating on that and making sure people understand that is difficult.
What are you known for on your team?
Oh, I'm not sure. I like to think...
Should I go back and ask Jess?
Yeah, right. I think that it is... that I find the right fit, the right talent fit for the job. And that a lot of times what people think are the impossible, I will look at it and say, okay, let's not say no. Like, let's go for gusto and see what we can get. And a lot of times people are surprised at the talent, the caliber of talent that I can get into a job. So I like to get people excited about the work that makes them.
I love that you do that, because sometimes people say about my photographers, if I'm at a portfolio show, oh, I'd love to use her. Oh, I'd love to use them. They're too expensive. I'm like, how do you know? Thank you for having that perception of them. I've been doing my job.
Right.
But at the same time, they might think this is like the coolest job on earth. Like, ask me. I can say no.
Right.
But please, come to me. And I love that you do that.
If I see a project that's very unique or has a certain look, and I think of somebody right away, and I'm like, I don't know. But if they get excited about it, they're more willing to meet us in the middle.
Definitely.
So.
And what do you love about your job?
I love working with all of the talented super, super talented people. I studied photography and I knew right in college that I could never go out and sell myself. So the fact that I can look at a sketch or a drawing or a mood or whatever, mood board and find the best talent, it's amazing the people that I've been able to work with through the years and people I've met.
On a Sunday, when you tell yourself, I am not looking at my emails, I'm going to leave my cell phone in my bag, what is it that you would choose to do to just, your favorite thing to do on a Sunday?
I love walking my dog, hanging out with my dog.
What kind of dog do you have?
He's a Bichon Frise, mini poodle mix, and he's the most awesome dog ever. Reading, if I can, we always...
That's the thing we have the least amount of time for.
You go to the library and you pick out 5 books.
And you're so hopeful.
The hope is that you're going to, it's the idea of having the time to read it. So I do a lot of reading.
And then what if you weren't in this job?
I almost was going to tell you not to ask me because I hate dealing with what ifs. But when we're in the stress of our job, I look at a florist or I look at the artists that I work with and I think, wow, if I could have that freedom to just be stress-free of either being a florist or I do dabble in making jewelry, like some sort of handmade thing that I would sell myself.
Right. And then you'd be independently wealthy, so you wouldn't have to worry about it at all. So, yeah. No, I agree. I think about that a lot, too. Our time is not our own. We're on 24 hours a day. I'm good at boundaries and we're all good at managing our time for sure. But sometimes it's nice to dream about wow, what if I went to work at 9 and I left at 5? That would be really kind of cool. Yeah. Well, this has been great. This has been so fantastic. Thank you so much. I love having you as a guest and a friend and having known you for so long. So thank you for doing this.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. In an industry where the rules are always changing, it's helpful to hear from those on the front line. Heather Elder is the visionary behind notesfromarepsjournal.com. Visit her website for industry updates, stunning photography and video, and the artist behind the work.